The first black SUV rolled to a stop so close that the dust it dragged behind it sprayed over Annabelle's bare feet. The second and third SUVs stopped right behind it, their dark bodies shining under the hot afternoon sun like they did not belong on this rough, broken road. Annabelle froze. Her right hand was still holding a small plastic spoon. Her left arm was supporting the old woman's head so Madame Teresa would not slump into the dirt. Madame Teresa's lips were dry. Her eyes were half closed. Her breath came in tiny, weak pulls, like she was fighting to stay in the world one more minute. Annabelle's heart pounded so hard she felt it in her throat. "What did I do?" she whispered, even though she knew she had done nothing wrong. But she had learned something on the streets. When rich people arrived in convoys, trouble usually came with them. The door of the first SUV opened. 2 security men stepped out first. Tall, hard faces, dark sunglasses, their shoulders wide like walls. One held a phone to his ear, another scanned the area like he expected danger to jump out from behind the small zinc-roof houses. People who had been mocking the old woman just minutes ago suddenly went quiet. Some of them moved back quickly, like the dusty ground might punish them for standing too close. Then the man inside the SUV stepped out. He was not just rich. He looked like someone who owned the road. His suit was neat. His shoes were clean, too clean for this place. His watch caught the sun and flashed. His face was sharp, serious, and tired in a way that made him look like he had not slept properly in days. Behind him, another security man opened an umbrella, blocking sunlight from touching his head, like even the sun was not allowed to stress him. Whispers rose around Annabelle like flies. "That's him." "No, it can't be." "Benjamin Anderson." Annabelle's mouth went dry. Even she knew that name. You did not live in Lagos and never hear it. People talked about him on buses, on radio, on TV screens in electronics shops. They called him the billionaire CEO who could buy a whole street without blinking. Annabelle's fingers trembled. She wanted to stand, to run, to hide, but she couldn't leave Madame Teresa. Madame Teresa suddenly coughed, weak and rough. Then her head rolled to the side. Her body felt lighter in Annabelle's arms in a scary way, like the old woman was slipping. "No, no, please," Annabelle whispered, leaning close. "Mama, don't go. Please hold on." She scooped another small spoon of jollof rice and lifted it to Madame Teresa's mouth. Madame Teresa's lips barely moved. Annabelle felt panic climb up her chest. Behind her, the crowd stayed at a safe distance, watching like this was a movie. Some of them had mocked Madame Teresa earlier. "She's acting." "Old woman, stand up and stop pretending. See her teeth, she's begging for attention." One woman had even laughed and said, "If she dies, she dies." Annabelle had hated the way they spoke, not just because it was cruel, because it felt like a warning. Like one day, if she fell too, they would laugh at her too. That was why, when a good Samaritan had dashed her $5 earlier, just 5, Annabelle had not used it for herself. She had been hungry, very hungry, but Madame Teresa had looked worse. Madame Teresa had been sitting on the ground near a roadside gutter, her wrapper dusty, her body thin and shaking. Her eyes had looked far away, like she was already halfway gone. Annabelle had walked past, then stopped. She remembered her mother's voice from years ago, soft but firm. "If you can help and you refuse, your heart becomes smaller." So Annabelle turned back. She used the $5 to buy jollof rice, chicken, and a bottle of water from a small food seller. She had rushed back and started feeding Madame Teresa with careful hands, like the old woman was her own family. Now, as these SUVs surrounded them, Annabelle felt small. Benjamin Anderson started walking toward her, 1 step, 2 steps. The security men moved with him, forming a protective shape around him. Their eyes stayed sharp, their hands stayed close to their sides. Annabelle's throat tightened. She didn't know why he was coming. Was Madame Teresa someone he hated? Was she someone who had done something wrong? Was Annabelle about to be punished for helping? Benjamin's face did not look angry. It looked broken, like he was holding a pain too heavy for his body. When he got close enough, he suddenly slowed down. His eyes dropped to Madame Teresa's face. His whole body changed in 1 second. It was like the strong billionaire CEO disappeared. Like the suit and the watch, and the power fell off him and hit the ground. His lips parted, his eyes went wide. And then he dropped to his knees, right there in the dust. Annabelle flinched back, shocked. Benjamin's hands reached out, trembling, and he gently touched Madame Teresa's cheek, like he was afraid she might disappear if he pressed too hard. His voice came out rough, almost like a cry. "Mommy." The street went silent. Annabelle's spoon slipped from her fingers and fell into the dust. The word hit her like a slap. Mommy. This dying old woman, this dusty, mocked, almost forgotten woman, was his mother. Benjamin leaned closer, tears rising fast in his eyes. "I've been searching for you," he said, his voice shaking. "Where have you been? Why didn't you let me find you?" Madame Teresa's eyelids fluttered. Slowly, like someone waking from deep water, she turned her head a little. Her eyes opened just enough to see him. For a moment she stared like she didn't understand. Then a soft sound came from her throat. "Ben," she breathed, weak as smoke. Benjamin let out a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob. Yes, it's me. It's me," he said, quickly. "Please don't close your eyes again, please." Annabelle's hands shook as she held Madame Teresa up. Her mind raced. How can this be real? She looked at the security men. They were watching, tense, but their faces had changed too. This wasn't a setup. This was not drama for show. They looked scared, like they knew Madame Teresa's life was hanging by a thread. Benjamin's eyes suddenly lifted to Annabelle. He looked at her tattered ash gown, the dust on her knees, the way her hands were gentle and steady, even though she looked tired and hungry. Then his gaze moved to the takeaway container, the jollof rice, the chicken, the water. His voice came out low, full of shock. You fed her?" Annabelle swallowed. "Yes," she whispered. She was dying. People were laughing at her. I couldn't leave her." Benjamin blinked like he was trying not to cry harder. He turned back to Madame Teresa, then back to Annabelle again. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked. "Thank you for saving my mother." The words made Annabelle feel dizzy. Saving his mother, a billionaire's mother. Her stomach twisted with fear and confusion. Benjamin stood up quickly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. He waved to his guards. "Carry her, carefully," he ordered. "Now, we're going to the hospital." 2 guards moved forward immediately. Annabelle tried to shift back so they could lift Madame Teresa, but Madame Teresa's fingers suddenly tightened around Annabelle's hand. It was a weak grip, but it was real. Madame Teresa looked up at Annabelle, eyes watery and tired. "Don't leave," she whispered. Annabelle's chest tightened. "I won't," she promised, though she didn't even know what that meant now. Benjamin noticed. His eyes softened, and he nodded once, like he understood. "You're coming with us," he said. Annabelle's eyes widened. "What?" she asked, her voice tiny. Benjamin didn't argue. He spoke like someone used to being obeyed, but his tone was not rude. It was urgent, serious. "You're coming," he repeated. "My mother trusts you, and she needs someone to hold her. Please." The guards lifted Madame Teresa gently and placed her into the back seat of the first SUV. The seats were leather. The inside smelled clean, like money. Benjamin looked at Annabelle again. "Enter," he said. Annabelle's legs felt weak. She had not been inside a car like this before, not even once. She climbed in slowly, scared she might dirty it with her gown, but no one shouted at her. No one stopped her. Madame Teresa lay across the seat, breathing shallowly. Annabelle held her hand and supported her shoulder the way she had been doing on the ground. Benjamin entered from the other side and leaned over his mother, his face close. "Hold on, Mommy," he whispered. "Hold on, I'm here now." The door slammed shut. The convoy moved. As they drove away, Annabelle looked out the tinted window. She saw the dusty road shrinking behind them. She saw the shocked faces of the villagers. Some mouths were open, some people looked afraid. And Annabelle realized something that made her heart twist. Those same people who mocked Madame Teresa would now bow if they knew who she was. And if they knew who Annabelle was sitting beside right now, their laughter would turn into fear. But Annabelle wasn't thinking about them. She was thinking about the old woman's weak breathing, because every time Madame Teresa's chest rose and fell, it looked like it might be the last time. Benjamin suddenly turned and looked straight at the driver. "Faster," he ordered, voice sharp. "If anything happens to her, He stopped himself like the rest of the sentence was too painful to speak. Annabelle held Madame Teresa tighter, whispering softly, "Please, Mama, please don't die." Madame Teresa's eyes fluttered again. She moved her lips like she wanted to say something. Annabelle leaned closer, her ear near the old woman's mouth. Madame Teresa's voice came out like a breath. "Tell Ben, I'm sorry." Benjamin heard it too. His face crumpled. "Sorry for what?" he begged. "Mommy, sorry for what? Just stay with me." Madame Teresa's eyes rolled back slightly. Her grip on Annabelle's fingers loosened. Annabelle's blood went cold. "Benjamin," she said, panic rising. Her hand, Benjamin grabbed his mother's wrist. He pressed his fingers to her pulse. His eyes widened with terror. "Stop the car," he shouted. "Stop." The SUV jerked slightly as the convoy adjusted. Annabelle stared at Madame Teresa's face. Her lips were slightly open, her breathing. It was getting quieter, quieter, like the world was stealing it away. Benjamin's voice broke into a desperate cry. "Mummy, please, please don't leave me again." And Annabelle, shaking, stared at the old woman's still face, realizing with horror that they might not reach the hospital in time. And if Madame Teresa died in her arms, Annabelle didn't know what would happen next. "Breathe, Mama. Please breathe." Annabelle's voice shook as the SUV sped through traffic, horns blaring as cars quickly moved out of the way. The siren from the escort vehicle screamed into the afternoon air, cutting through the noise of Lagos like a sharp knife. Madame Teresa lay still, too still. Her chest barely moved now, and every second felt longer than the last. Annabelle pressed her ear closer to the old woman's mouth, praying to hear even the faintest breath. Benjamin sat frozen for one terrible moment, his fingers still on his mother's wrist. His face was pale, all color drained away. "I can't feel it," he whispered. "I can't feel her pulse." "No," Annabelle cried softly. "Please, no." She shook Madame Teresa gently, careful not to hurt her. "Mama, open your eyes. Please, don't go." The driver glanced back, fear in his eyes. "We're 5 minutes away, sir," he shouted. 5 minutes? It sounded like a lifetime. Benjamin suddenly moved. He leaned over his mother and spoke loudly, urgently, his voice breaking apart. "Mommy, you promised you would not leave me again. You promised. Please, please open your eyes." Nothing. Annabelle felt tears roll down her face. She wiped them quickly, refusing to stop trying. She lifted the bottle of water and gently rubbed some on Madame Teresa's lips. "Please," she whispered again, "I don't even know you, but please don't die." The SUV screeched into the hospital compound. Doctors and nurses were already waiting, alerted by phone calls and flashing lights. The moment the car stopped, doors flew open. "Emergency," someone shouted. Benjamin jumped out first, his voice strong again, filled with command. "My mother, she collapsed. She's not breathing properly." The hospital staff moved fast, very fast. They lifted Madame Teresa onto a stretcher. Machines beeped. Oxygen masks appeared. A nurse began pressing gently on Madame Teresa's chest. Annabelle climbed out of the car, her legs shaking so badly she almost fell. Benjamin caught her arm. "Stay with me," he said quietly, his eyes red. "Please." They followed the stretcher down the bright hospital hallway. The smell of medicine filled the air. The floor shined. Everything felt too clean, too quiet for what was happening. A doctor stopped suddenly and raised a hand. "Sir," he said to Benjamin, serious, "we need space." Benjamin nodded quickly. "Yes." "Do whatever you need to do. Please, save her." The stretcher disappeared through double doors marked "Emergency Only." The doors closed, and just like that, the world went silent. Benjamin stood there, staring at the door like it might open again, if he looked hard enough. Annabelle stood beside him, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Each one felt heavier than the last. Benjamin suddenly sank into a chair, his head in his hands. The powerful billionaire CEO looked small now. Lost. Like a child who had been searching for his mother and finally found her, only to lose her again. "I failed her," he whispered. Annabelle turned to him. "No," she said gently. "You didn't." He shook his head. "She disappeared years ago," he said, his voice rough. "I searched everywhere. Shelters, churches, villages. I hired people. I used my money. Nothing. He swallowed hard. I stopped sleeping properly. Every call scared me. Every old woman I saw on the street. I looked twice. Tears slipped through his fingers. And today, I almost arrived too late. Annabelle's heart hurt listening to him. She didn't die, she said softly, even though she didn't know if it was true. Not yet. Benjamin looked at her, his eyes full of pain. You believe that? Annabelle nodded. I have to. A nurse finally stepped out of the emergency room. Benjamin jumped up instantly. How is she? He asked. The nurse hesitated. She's very weak, she said carefully. Severe dehydration, malnutrition. Her blood pressure dropped dangerously low. Benjamin held his breath. But, he asked. We managed to stabilize her for now, the nurse said. She's alive. Annabelle gasped and covered her mouth. Benjamin's knees almost gave way. Thank God, he whispered. But she's not out of danger yet, the nurse continued. The next few hours are critical. Benjamin nodded. Do everything, he said firmly. Anything she needs. The nurse looked at Annabelle. And you? She asked. Are you family? Annabelle froze. Benjamin answered before she could speak. She saved my mother, he said. She stays. The nurse nodded and returned inside. Hours passed slowly. The sky outside turned orange, then dark. Annabelle sat quietly beside Benjamin, her stomach aching with hunger. She had not eaten since morning, but she did not complain. She remembered how Madame Teresa had looked when she fed her the jollof rice. She remembered the mocking voices. She remembered the fear, and she thought, if I had walked away. The emergency doors finally opened again. This time the doctor came out with a calmer face. She's stable, he said, still unconscious, but her vitals are improving. Benjamin let out a long breath he had been holding for hours. Can we see her? Yes, the doctor said, one at a time. Benjamin turned to Annabelle. You first, he said. Annabelle's eyes widened. Me? He nodded. She asked for you in the ambulance, he said quietly. She didn't want to let go of your hand. Annabelle's chest tightened. She walked into the room slowly. Madame Teresa lay on the bed, tubes connected to her arms, oxygen resting under her nose. Her face looked calmer now, cleaner, softer. Annabelle sat beside her and held her hand gently. Mama, she whispered, you're safe now. Tears slipped down her face. I didn't know who you were, she said softly. I just didn't want you to die. Madame Teresa's fingers twitched. Annabelle froze. Mama? Slowly Madame Teresa's eyes opened. Weak, tired, but open. She looked around, confused at first. Then her eyes landed on Annabelle. Recognition filled them. A soft smile appeared on her lips. You, she whispered. Annabelle smiled through tears. Yes, me. Madame Teresa squeezed her hand weakly. Thank you, she said, for saving me. Annabelle broke down crying. Outside the room, Benjamin watched through the glass, tears streaming freely down his face. His mother was alive, and the woman who saved her was a homeless stranger with a kind heart. Benjamin whispered to himself, his voice full of emotion and promise, I will never let you go hungry again. But deep inside, something else was beginning to grow. A question, a curiosity. Who exactly is Annabelle? And how did she end up on the streets? And as Benjamin stepped into the room, ready to hear her story, neither of them knew that the truth Annabelle carried would change everything they thought they knew and pull them both into a future neither of them was prepared for. The room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of the monitor beside Madame Teresa's bed. Annabelle sat on the small chair close to her, still holding her hand. She was afraid that if she let go, something bad might happen again. Madame Teresa's grip was weak, but it was warm. Alive. Benjamin stood on the other side of the bed, watching them both. His eyes moved from his mother's face to Annabelle's worn slippers, then back again. His mind was full, heavy with questions he didn't know how to ask yet. Madame Teresa turned her head slowly toward him. Ben, she whispered. Benjamin leaned forward immediately. Yes, Mommy, I'm here. Her eyes filled with tears. You found me, she said softly. I didn't think you would. Benjamin swallowed hard. I never stopped looking, he replied. Never. Madame Teresa closed her eyes for a moment, like the words had taken all her strength. When she opened them again, she looked at Annabelle. This child, she said weakly, lifting her free hand slightly toward Annabelle, she is the reason I'm still here. Benjamin nodded. I know, he said, and I will never forget it. Annabelle shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't used to praise. On the streets, people looked through her, not at her. Madame Teresa squeezed her hand again. What is your name, my daughter? She asked. Annabelle, she replied softly. Madame Teresa smiled. Annabelle, she repeated slowly, like she was tasting the name. You have a good heart. Annabelle's eyes burned with tears. She stood up suddenly. I should go, she said quickly. You are safe now. You don't need me anymore. Benjamin turned sharply. What? He asked. Annabelle avoided his eyes. I sleep under the bridge, she said. I don't belong here. Benjamin felt something twist inside his chest. You saved my mother with your last money, he said quietly, and you think you don't belong here? Annabelle shrugged, her shoulders tight. That's just how life is, she replied. Madame Teresa looked between them, confused. Ben, she said, her voice firmer now, don't let her leave. Benjamin didn't hesitate. You're not leaving, he told Annabelle, not tonight. Not ever, if you don't want to. Annabelle laughed softly, but it wasn't happy. You don't understand, she said. People like me don't just walk into big houses and stay. Benjamin took a step closer. People like you, he repeated, his voice calm but serious, are exactly who should. Annabelle finally looked at him. Something in his eyes made her pause. Not pity, respect. Later that night, after doctors confirmed Madame Teresa was stable and moved to a private room, Benjamin arranged a small bed for Annabelle in the same room. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The sheets were clean, too clean. Her body felt strange, resting on something soft. She thought about the bridge, the noise, the cold ground. And for the first time in a long time, she cried quietly, not from pain, but from confusion. The next morning, sunlight filled the room. Madame Teresa woke up stronger. She ate a little food. She drank water slowly. The color in her face began to return. Benjamin sat beside her, smiling gently. Annabelle watched from a corner, unsure where she belonged. Madame Teresa suddenly spoke. Annabelle, she said. Yes, Mama? Annabelle replied quickly. Madame Teresa studied her face. You are too young to be sleeping under a bridge, she said gently. What happened to you? Annabelle's fingers tightened around the edge of the chair. Benjamin's smile faded. He turned to her. You don't have to answer, he said softly. Annabelle took a deep breath. No, she said, I will. Her voice shook as she began. I wasn't always homeless. Benjamin leaned forward slightly. I had parents, she continued, good parents. We weren't rich, but we were okay. My mother was a trader. My father was a civil servant. Madame Teresa listened closely. I went to school, Annabelle said. I did well. I even went to university. Benjamin's eyes widened. University, he repeated. Yes, she said. I studied accountancy. The room went quiet. Annabelle smiled sadly. I had dreams, she said. I wanted to work in an office, wear neat clothes, help my parents. Benjamin felt his heart sink. What happened? He asked quietly. Annabelle swallowed. One night, she said, her voice breaking, everything ended. She paused. Madame Teresa reached out and touched her arm gently. Take your time, she said. Annabelle nodded. There was an attack, she continued. Robbers, armed men. They broke into our house late at night. Benjamin's jaw tightened. They killed my parents, Annabelle said, tears spilling freely now, both of them, in one night. Benjamin covered his mouth. Madame Teresa gasped softly. I survived because I was hiding, Annabelle went on. Under the bed. I heard everything. Her shoulders shook. After that, I lost myself, she said. Relatives took what they could. I became a burden, one house to another, until no one wanted me anymore. Benjamin's hands clenched. I ended up on the streets, Annabelle finished. I stopped caring about myself. I just existed. The room was heavy with silence. Benjamin stood up, suddenly, and turned away, his eyes wet. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. I'm so sorry. Madame Teresa wiped tears from her own eyes. You have suffered too much, she said softly. Annabelle shook her head. I'm alive, she said. That's enough. Benjamin turned back to her, his face set with quiet determination. No, he said firmly, that is not enough. Annabelle looked at him, confused. You have a degree in accountancy, he continued. You are intelligent, kind, strong. He paused. I want you to work with me. Annabelle froze. What? She asked. I want you to be my assistant accountant, Benjamin said, at my company. Annabelle stared at him like she hadn't heard correctly. That's not funny, she said. I'm not joking, he replied. Madame Teresa smiled weakly. She deserves it, she said. Life owes her that much. Annabelle's hands trembled. I haven't worked in years, she said. I don't even have clothes. We will take care of everything, Benjamin said. Just say yes. Annabelle's heart raced. A job, a future, a life. It sounded too good to be real. I need time, she whispered. Benjamin nodded. Take all the time you need, he said. Later that afternoon, doctors cleared Madame Teresa for discharge the next day. Benjamin arranged everything: a car, a nurse, security. As Annabelle watched him give orders calmly, confidently, she realized something strange. She wasn't scared of him anymore. She felt safe. That night, as she lay in the hospital bed again, Annabelle stared at the ceiling. Her past had finally been spoken aloud. But her future? That was still unknown. And deep inside, a quiet fear began to grow. What if this kindness comes with a price? Because Annabelle had learned the hard way. Sometimes when life lifts you up suddenly, it prepares to test you even harder. And as Benjamin stood outside her door, watching over both his mother and the woman who saved her, his feelings were beginning to change. From gratitude to something deeper, something dangerous, something neither of them was ready to name. And when Annabelle finally said yes, everything would change. Annabelle stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized the girl staring back at her. Her hair had been washed and neatly combed. Her face was clean. Her lips were no longer cracked from sun and dust. She wore a simple cream blouse and a black skirt that fit properly, not like the oversized clothes she used to pick from charity piles. Still, her eyes gave her away. Those eyes held memories of cold nights, hunger and shame. Behind her, a soft knock came on the door. Annabelle? Madame Teresa's voice called gently. Annabelle turned quickly. Yes, Mama. Madame Teresa walked in slowly, still recovering, but stronger than before. She wore a neat Ankara gown, and her headscarf was tied carefully. Her skin looked brighter now that she was eating properly again. She smiled when she saw Annabelle. My daughter, she said, her voice full of emotion, you look beautiful. Annabelle's throat tightened. Thank you, she whispered. Madame Teresa stepped closer and held her hands. You saved me with your last money, she said softly. Now let life save you too. Don't fight it. Annabelle nodded slowly, but her heart was pounding. Today was her first day at Benjamin Anderson's company, and she was scared. Not of hard work, not of learning. She was scared of people who would look at her and see a lie. Because no matter how clean she looked now, she still felt like the homeless girl from under the bridge. A car horn sounded outside. Madame Teresa squeezed her hands gently. Go, she said. Benjamin is waiting. Annabelle took a deep breath and stepped out of the room. The Anderson mansion was quiet but grand. White walls, polished floors, tall curtains, and bright lights that made everything shine. Even the air felt expensive. At the entrance, Benjamin stood in a navy suit, his posture calm and strong. 2 guards stood behind him, watching the compound. But when Benjamin saw Annabelle, his face softened. You're ready, he said. Annabelle nodded, unable to speak. Benjamin opened the car door himself. Get in, he said gently. Annabelle hesitated for a second. A CEO opening a car door for her. It didn't feel real, but she entered. As the car moved, Annabelle stared out the window. Lagos rushed past. Buses, people, markets, billboards, and tall buildings. She watched the city like she was watching a movie. A part of her still expected someone to tap her shoulder and say, "Madam, wake up. This is not your life." Benjamin sat beside her, quiet. Finally, he spoke. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. Annabelle gave a small laugh without joy. "Everyone will know," she replied. Benjamin frowned. "Know what?" "That I'm not meant to be there," she said. "They'll look at me and think, 'Who is this girl?'" Benjamin's eyes stayed on her. "Let them look," he said calmly. "Your work will answer them." Annabelle swallowed. But she knew Lagos. Lagos could be kind, and Lagos could be cruel. They arrived at a tall glass building that touched the sky. Annabelle's stomach twisted when she saw it. This was not a small office. This was a whole world. Security opened the car door quickly. People outside noticed the convoy and straightened up. Heads turned. A receptionist inside gasped softly when she saw Benjamin walk in. "Good morning, sir," she said quickly, almost bowing. Benjamin nodded once. Then he did something that made Annabelle's heart jump. He didn't walk ahead like a boss leaving people behind. He walked beside her, like she mattered. As they entered, eyes followed them. Whispers started immediately. "Who is she? Is that his girlfriend? No, she looks too simple. Why is he walking with her like that?" Annabelle's cheeks burned. She kept her eyes on the floor. Benjamin leaned closer and whispered, "Head up." Annabelle slowly lifted her head. Her heart was still shaking, but she forced herself to walk straight. Benjamin led her into a private office and introduced her to a woman in glasses who looked serious and neat. "This is Mrs. Adebayo," Benjamin said. "She's the head accountant." Mrs. Adebayo looked at Annabelle from head to toe. Her eyes were sharp. "This is the new assistant?" she asked. "Yes," Benjamin replied. Mrs. Adebayo's lips tightened slightly. "She looks young." Annabelle's hands clenched. Benjamin's voice remained calm. "She is qualified," he said. "Train her." Mrs. Adebayo nodded slowly. "As you wish, sir." Benjamin turned to Annabelle. "If anyone troubles you, tell me," he said quietly. Annabelle nodded. Then he left. The moment he stepped out, the room felt colder. Mrs. Adebayo pointed to a chair. "Sit," she said. Annabelle sat. Mrs. Adebayo pushed a pile of files toward her. "Let's see if you truly studied accountancy," she said. Annabelle's heart pounded. This was her chance. She opened the first file. Numbers, receipts, reports. For a moment her mind went blank. It had been so long. But then something happened. Like a sleeping part of her woke up. She began to read, to calculate, to check errors. Her fingers moved quickly. Her brain started to remember. Mrs. Adebayo watched quietly, her expression slowly changing. After an hour, she leaned forward. "Where did you learn this?" she asked. Annabelle swallowed. "University," she said. Before life happened." Mrs. Adebayo nodded slowly. "You're good," she admitted, almost surprised. Annabelle felt a small spark of hope. Maybe she could do this, but hope did not last long in Lagos. During lunch break, Annabelle walked toward the staff cafeteria. She held her small bag tightly, nervous. The smell of food filled the air, making her stomach ache. As she reached for a tray, a group of women near the corner turned and stared openly. One of them laughed. "You're the one the CEO brought in, right?" Annabelle froze. Another woman smirked. "Maybe she used charm," she said loudly. A third added, "Or maybe she has a special connection to Madame Teresa." They laughed again. Annabelle's face burned. She wanted to walk away. But she forced herself to pick her food quietly. Then the first woman stepped closer, blocking her path. "Tell us the truth," she said, smiling like a knife. "Who are you to Mr. Benjamin?" Annabelle's throat tightened. "I'm just," she began. "Just what?" the woman cut in. "A nobody that suddenly entered the company like a queen." The women laughed. Annabelle's hands trembled so badly her spoon fell into her tray with a loud clink. Silence fell for 1 second. Then the woman leaned closer and whispered harshly, "People like you don't last here. You will fall." Annabelle felt her eyes fill with tears. She turned quickly and rushed out of the cafeteria, leaving her food behind. She walked fast, trying to hold her tears in. But as she turned a corner, she bumped into someone. Strong arms caught her before she fell. Benjamin. He looked down at her face and instantly saw the tears she was fighting. "What happened?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. Annabelle shook her head. "It's nothing," she whispered. Benjamin's jaw tightened. "It's not nothing," he said. Behind them, the women who mocked her had followed quietly, suddenly worried. Benjamin turned his head slightly and looked straight at them. His eyes were calm, but his calm was scary. The women froze. Benjamin spoke, his voice steady but cold. "Who made her cry?" No one answered. The air felt heavy. Benjamin took one step forward. His guards appeared behind him, silent like shadows. The women's faces turned pale. Benjamin asked again, slower this time. "Who made her cry?" And as the women began to stammer and point fingers at each other, Annabelle realized something. Benjamin was about to do something big, something that would shake the whole company, and she didn't know if that would save her, or make everyone hate her even more. Because the next thing Benjamin did would expose enemies Annabelle didn't even know she had. The cafeteria was so quiet that even breathing felt loud. Benjamin stood in front of the women who had mocked Annabelle, his posture calm but powerful. His eyes were steady, and that scared them more than shouting ever could. "I asked a simple question," he said slowly. "Who made her cry?" One of the women's hands shook as she tried to speak. "Sir, it was just a joke," she stammered. "We didn't mean—" Benjamin raised his hand slightly, stopping her. "There is nothing funny about cruelty," he said, "especially to someone who has done nothing wrong." He turned to Annabelle. "Look at me," he said gently. Annabelle lifted her head. Her eyes were red, but she stood straight. Benjamin nodded once, like he was proud of her strength. Then he turned back to the staff. "This woman you mocked," he said, his voice firm, "saved my mother's life with her last $5. The room filled with shocked gasps. "She had nothing," he continued, "no house, no food for herself. Yet she chose kindness when all of you walked past." The women's faces drained of color. Benjamin took another step forward. "Anyone who disrespects her," he said quietly, "disrespects me." No one spoke. "I expect professionalism in this company," he added. "If you cannot show it, you can leave." That was all. Benjamin turned away and placed a gentle hand on Annabelle's shoulder. "Come," he said. "You don't need to be here." As they walked out, whispers followed them, but this time the whispers were different. Some were ashamed, some were afraid, and some were full of respect. From that day on, everything began to change. Annabelle threw herself into her work. She arrived early and left late. She studied at night, relearning everything she thought she had lost. Numbers became her safe place again. Balance sheets, reports, order. Mrs. Adebayo watched closely. Then one afternoon she called Annabelle into her office. "You're improving fast," she said. "Very fast." Annabelle smiled nervously. "I'm just grateful for the opportunity," she replied. Mrs. Adebayo nodded. "Opportunity only works when talent meets discipline," she said. "You have both." Weeks turned into months. Annabelle grew confident. She learned the systems. She corrected errors others missed. Slowly, people stopped whispering and started asking for her help. Benjamin watched all of this quietly. He noticed how her face lit up when she solved a problem. How she stayed back to help others without complaining. How she still carried kindness, even after everything life had done to her. Their conversations became longer, first about work, then about life, then about dreams. One evening, Benjamin drove her home to the mansion after a long day. "I never thanked you properly," he said suddenly. Annabelle looked at him. "You already did," she replied. "No," he said. "I mean, for reminding me what really matters." Annabelle smiled softly. Madame Teresa loved watching them together. She saw the way Benjamin looked at Annabelle when he thought no one was watching. She saw the way Annabelle always checked on Benjamin when he looked tired. One night, Madame Teresa called Annabelle to her room. "My daughter," she said gently, holding Annabelle's hands, "life broke you, but you didn't break." Annabelle swallowed. "You didn't just save my life," Madame Teresa continued. "You healed my son too." Annabelle felt her heart race. Months later, Benjamin finally spoke the words that had been growing in his heart. "I love you," he said simply. Annabelle cried when she answered. "So do I." Their wedding was nothing Lagos had ever seen. The hall was filled with light, flowers, and joy. Important people came from everywhere, but none of that mattered to Annabelle. What mattered was Madame Teresa. With tears in her eyes, Madame Teresa stood strong and walked Annabelle down the aisle herself. "My daughter," she whispered, "kindness brought you here." Benjamin waited at the altar, his eyes full of love. When Annabelle reached him, he took her hands and smiled. Two broken stories had found healing in each other. 2 years later, laughter filled the Anderson home again. This time, it was the sound of babies. Annabelle held a baby boy in her arms. Benjamin cradled a baby girl. "Henry," Annabelle whispered, kissing the boy's forehead. "Helen," Benjamin said softly, smiling at the girl. Madame Teresa sat nearby, holding both babies one after the other, tears streaming freely down her face. "If I had died that day," she said quietly, "I would never have seen this." Annabelle knelt beside her. "You lived because kindness lives," she replied. Madame Teresa looked at her grandchildren and smiled through tears. "Second chances," she said. "That is what saved us." Annabelle looked around her beautiful home, her loving family, and her peaceful life. She remembered the dusty road, the mocking voices, the $5, and she understood something deeply. Kindness never forgets who planted it. It waits, and when the time is right, it returns, bigger than you ever imagined. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.